A Texas anesthesiologist who tampered with IV bags, injecting them with dangerous drugs, and eventually killing someone was just sentenced to 190 years in prison. We're going to update you on the case of Raynaldo Ortiz Jr., whose crimes were caught on camera. And we're going to break it down with Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Aronberg. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A federal jury convicted an anesthesiologist known as Raynaldo Ortiz Jr. out in Dallas, and he will now spend many lifetimes in prison after he intentionally poisoned IV bags that were about to be used in surgeries. I know the main question. What are you talking about? Why would he ever do this? You want to know why? Because apparently he was mad about a mistake that he made in one of his own surgeries and potentially was in fear that he was going to lose his medical license. I'm going to explain it. And by the way, his misdeeds, how did they come to light? This is what makes this case absolutely heartbreaking. This is a story, by the way, that we focused on a previous sidebar, but we're revisiting it now because we have these new developments. So to talk more about this as we go through it, I have with me right now Dave Aronberg. He is the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida. My good friend, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be back with you, Jesse.
This is a really disturbing one. Have you seen criminal cases related to, it's not medical malpractice, it's worse than that, but this kind of intentional wrongdoing in a medical facility? Have you covered cases like this?
You know, I've seen some other cases that are similar where you have someone who ends up killing people and they do it for nefarious motivations. I've never seen it, though, for this kind of motivation where it's like, what? Because you're worried about losing your license? It doesn't make sense. And even though prosecutors do not have to prove motive in these cases, the jurors always want to know the why.
Yeah, and I want to get into the backstory here because this is what, elevates us to a different level. So I'm going to take you step by step through how investigators were able to connect the dots here. We go back to 2022. Several patients at a surgery center in Dallas started having these cardiac emergencies, seemingly out of nowhere. And it was during pretty routine surgeries. Multiple people had to be rushed out of the Surgicare North Dallas facility, and then they were taken to trauma hospitals for treatment. So about a month after what were these strange incidents, they started happening, this anesthesiologist named Dr. Melanie Casper wanted to treat herself for dehydration after a shift at the facility. So she takes an IV bag home, and it was supposed to just have, saline in it. But after she used it, the 55-year-old died at home in front of her husband, who said that she was just writhing on the floor in pain. Then, August 2022, an 18-year-old who was just having a routine sinus surgery, when all of a sudden, he had to be rushed to the intensive care unit. Doctors, they started to get suspicious that something was wrong with the IV, so a lab analyzed the fluid from the bag that was used during the 18-year-old's procedure, and they found multiple drugs that had no business being in there, including epinephrine, lidocaine, as well as this nerve-blocking agent. And according to experts, that mixture could have caused the boy's reaction. And the lab also documented a puncture in the bag as well. So in all, an investigation uncovered that 11 patients had major and potentially devastating reactions during surgery because of these tainted IV bags. Now, Dave, before I get into the evidence about linking up to Raynaldo, that is just next level.
Next level indeed. And the stories are just horrific. Even the ones who survived, like that 18-year-old, his parents were told that he has a 50-50 chance of surviving, of living. Imagine you go in for some minor surgery and then you're about to die from it, and people are wondering why. Well, because this guy kept doing it over and over again is finally why he got caught, or else perhaps he would never have gotten caught.
And you think about the motivation, it would be to make the hospital look bad, right? That's what it is, the facility, to make the facility look bad. I'm angry at them. Well, look what's happening. All these people I'm going to purposely poison and, say it's the hospital's fault.
But what kind of a cold, callous individual would do this? In fact, he was there on camera as these individuals were wheeled out, like fighting for life. He was sitting there still filling up his IV bags. I mean, it really does sound like true evil.
So there's this investigation. It rolled out in September of 2022. The Texas Medical Board was notified. They held an emergency meeting and they suspended Ortiz's medical license. And as part of that investigation, as Dave just said, there's this damning surveillance video that was uncovered. In one of the videos, Ortiz can be seen taking IV bags from this warming bin and then replacing them right after. And those bags were then carried into operating rooms, and the patients the IV saline was given to, they suffered these sudden cardiac emergencies. You have another video where Ortiz is seen taking a vial out of a cabinet and an IV bag out of the warmer. In another one, Ortiz walks down the hall, opens the warmer, looks inside, shuts it again, possibly checking to see if the ones he tampered were still in there. There are videos that also show Ortiz mixing up vials of medication and even watching his victims, as Dave said, were wheeled out of the operating room by emergency responders. He has to know what he did. And exactly what Ortiz is doing, it can't always be seen on the cameras, but prosecutors were able to draw some pretty strong inferences from what those cameras did capture, right?
People lie, but video does not, and that video was very powerful. They got him, and perhaps that's why he decided not to really contest the charges too much. He knew he was guilty, but it doesn't give you any comfort if you're the family members of the people who died so unnecessarily, or who was clean to life unnecessarily because of a guy who had his own personal agenda.
Well, I'm going to get into his defenses. We'll talk about his defenses at trial, but according to prosecutors, they say that he was upset over disciplinary action taken against him at Surgicare North Dallas because of a mistake he made in one of his own surgeries. So again, he just wanted to mess up the surgeries of his colleagues as well. So again, just a completely, if that's what it is, completely random motive, and you're just hurting innocent people in the way. It's sickening to think about. Now, during the trial, the jury saw those surveillance videos. They heard testimony from patients and fellow doctors. They listened to experts explain why it would never be necessary for an anesthesiologist to be handling medicines and IV bags the way Ortiz did. Now, the defense, what did they do? They tried to say that Ortiz was a scapegoat, that the hospital didn't really do a thorough investigation, and they just decided to blame him instead, essentially saying it could have been doctors' mistakes for what happened to all these people. And they also had a medical expert who testified that the patients could have had other conditions that caused them to go into cardiac arrest. And possibly, I will say, one of the best defenses that Ortiz had was that the only fingerprint that was found on an IV bag wasn't his. And despite that, after 8 days of trial in federal court, Ortiz was found guilty. A jury convicted him of 4 counts of tampering with consumer products resulting in serious bodily injury, 1 count of tampering with a consumer product, and 5 counts of intentional adulteration of a drug. Those defenses didn't work, Dave. Why?
The video speaks volumes. They showed he was the one who was tampering with the bags. No one else had the means, the motives, and opportunity. There was puncture wounds, marks in the bags. So this all pointed to one person. It was his responsibility, after all, to deal with the bags, to handle the bags. And this poor doctor at the end who was dehydrated and took one of his bags and then went home and died shortly thereafter. Well, who else could be blamed for that? These were his bags, unless someone was trying to sabotage him to sabotage the hospital. I don't get it.
The idea of the fingerprint, though, that they only found 1 fingerprint on the bag and it wasn't his, that wasn't significant. And I get, look, they also couple with the idea of these people might have had, people are going in for surgeries, you know, there's always complications with surgeries. There might have been other reasons for why they died. But I think at the end of the day, as if I were to tell you that an anesthesiologist was poisoning multiple people, you say that seems like an unbelievable story. Yeah. But if the prosecution's able to prove that story, that is significant, even despite what the defense was trying to do, raise some reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and the lack of fingerprints does not mean that he didn't do it.
Well, on November 20th, Ortiz was sentenced officially to 190 years in prison. That is the maximum there. And during his sentencing hearing, victims and their family members, they were given the opportunity to speak. The son of one victim told the court that his 10-year-old son no longer trusts doctors because, quote, a doctor tried to kill Pops. Dr. John Casper, this is the husband of the doctor who died after treating her dehydration with one of those tainted bags, told the court that the image of his wife's lifeless eyes would never leave him. And despite the judge saying that what happened to the victim was tantamount to attempted murder, I should tell you, Ortiz has not been charged in Dr. Casper's death directly. So Dave, a couple of things there. Why is that? Why wasn't he charged with her murder?
You don't need to, because he's got 180, 190 years in prison, so you don't need to. It's harder. It's a much higher burden. There is the issue of, does she have other medical conditions? So the prosecutors probably thought, we got this low-hanging fruit. He tampered with the materials here. He violated his Hippocratic oath. We don't need to prove that he murdered her.
Because I don't think he even knew that she was going to grab the bag.
Exactly. So this was, he was tampering with these bags, and then she grabbed it because she was dehydrated. So to prove intentional murder here is way too difficult for prosecutors who didn't need to do it, because he's going to be facing the rest of his life in prison anyway.
190 years for a 60-year-old. He's going to be spending the rest of his life in prison. I don't know how familiar you are with law down there, but is any chance of parole, or is this he's a life sentence?
His only chance is on appeal. If his lawyers can overturn the conviction, get a new trial. It's going to be very hard to do so, though. He's in a lot of trouble. I expect that he'll die in prison.
I want to leave you with this. This is from a statement from the U.S. Attorney, Leah Simonton, and she had this to say. This disgraced doctor acted no better than an armed assailant spraying bullets indiscriminately into a crowd. Dr. Ortiz tampered with random IV bags, apparently unconcerned with who he hurt, but he wielded an invisible weapon, a cocktail of heart-stopping drugs concealed inside an IV bag designed to help patients heal. It's quite the statement.
Yeah, he's a medical terrorist. This is what terrorists do. They attack indiscriminately innocent people. That's what he did. And he had his own motives, but he's going to face justice because he's never getting out of prison now. So well said by the U.S. Attorney, the Assistant U.S. Attorney. And I do think it sends a message for other medical professionals that, you have a Hippocratic oath. If you're going to do anything in this area, you're going to be scrutinized and ultimately face justice.
Dave Aronberg, good seeing you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us as always. And please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.